So let's talk to Muda Yusuf, who is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's live to us here in the studio. Some of the companies that are now being impacted by the total land closure are also listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange in the FMCG group. You know them: Nigerian Breweries, Guinness, PZ Cousins, Nestle, Cadbury, and the rest of others. So how will this impact everyone in the loop? And that's why we're having this conversation right here and right now. Muda Yusuf, it's good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. This is a very, as big as the story can get. This just try to dissect your 3-page statement overnight, and we appreciate that, keeping everyone up to speed. So we know what this looks like right now. If we place this land border closure within the bigger picture of the IMF, just latest report about GDP growth seriously lagging much smaller countries. If you squeeze most of them into Nigeria, you still have more land mass and population. What does it really tell?
Well, all of these things point to the fact that we need to do a lot more to manage the economy better. We need to have a more strategic approach. We need to have a more holistic view of the economy. Quite a number of sectors contribute to this economy, just as you read in the statement that we issued. The distributive trade contributes about 15% to our GDP. It's perhaps the largest employer of labor. And it also plays a major role in linking producers to consumers. It is not possible for a producer to open shops in over 700 local governments in Nigeria, not to talk of communities around the local government. It is the traders that will do that. And Nigeria is a major hub for the West African sub-region. I take the point that there are economic arguments and there are also security arguments on this matter. But it is important to have a clear understanding of the full dimensions of the costs of this closure on this economy. Because what I've seen is a kind of celebration that this is good, smuggling has gone down, this has happened, petrol costs. Of course, there are benefits, but nobody's talking about the cost. And for me, the cost is quite enormous.
What do you call the cost-benefit analysis?
We have to do a cost-benefit analysis, and this happens a lot in the way we manage the economy. Most times, we put policies in place, we celebrate the benefits. We don't interrogate the cost. And the way to run an economy well is to have a balance, a proper evaluation of costs and benefits.
So we're looking at the facts and the realities here of this border closure.
Exactly.
What are the facts?
Well, the facts is that first, we have seen a reduction in the smuggling of rice, for instance. We have seen a reduction in the outflow, smuggling out of our petroleum products. But we also seen a total paralysis of our trade within the sub-region. Because no matter what we say, a lot of Nigerians do a lot of trading, legitimate trading, I must say, within the sub-region.
Yeah, we're talking about legitimate
trading
right now.
We are not here to condone smuggling or smuggling of arms or smuggling of goods that are not
or those who want to circumvent.
But the policy is hurting a lot of innocent people. And that is why we feel that the government needs to take into account these unintended consequences of this policy. Take the northern parts of the country, for instance, because before we came up with this statement, I had discussions with businesses who are in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Kano, in Oyo State, just to have a feel of how these things are affecting them. And it's hurting them very seriously. The whole northern part, for instance, the customs chief was saying that whatever trade we want to do, we should do by sea. Now, what kind of trading would you do with Niger, with Chad, by sea? These are landlocked countries. And the trading community in that axis in the northwestern or northeastern part of the country, the contribution to the economies of those localities
of those states
are huge.
Yeah, because if we talk about distributive trade,
yes.
So for Lagos, Port Harcourt, Calabar, whatever, Warri, yes, you can do by sea.
Yes.
But if you manufacturing in Lagos, Unilever, PZ, flour mills, Honeywell, Dangote flour, Dangote sugar, you've got to move this by road.
Exactly.
All the way to Maiduguri, to Kano, and elsewhere.
Exactly.
And there by other trucks cross-border. And
Exactly.
these are folks who are doing legitimate business.
Yeah, yeah,
so this is how you think distributive trade is getting knocked by this. Very interesting. Hold on your comment, Muda Yusuf. Let's bring in Ayode Jebo, who is the CEO at Afrinvest Securities, into this conversation. Ayode is joining us live from the Nigerian Stock Exchange, our studios in downtown Lagos. Ayode Jebo, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Basim. Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is, we're counting the costs now, looking at this land border closure. Buda Yusuf, the head of the LCCI, the Director General, was speaking more to the informal trade, individuals and businesses. But if we look at the corporates, the big companies, we have a very large segment of the Nigerian stock market where you have these big multinationals. Some of them are indigenous as well, like the Dangote Group and others, who will be locked into this locked land border closure.
Okay, thanks for that. Looking at the listed companies, especially the consumer goods, we try to look at their financials in terms of what proportion in terms of their revenue comes from exporting to these neighboring countries. That's the Niger Republic, Cameroon, and the Benin Republic. So we looked at, you see PZ, based on their own financials, about 4.7 billion naira worth of goods are exported to these neighboring countries, are exported to neighboring countries. You look at Nestle is about 3 billion. Also looking at Unilever is about 1.7 billion. Though we are unable to ascertain the part of it that is more, that is land, that goes through the land border compared to those that go through the seaport border. But by and large, if you look at in terms of the size, in terms of the proportion of transactions that goes on through the land border, it's very significant. And just closing the land border overnight would distort a lot of their projections. So for most of these companies, you see even for the industrial goods sector, most of those companies, they are producing, they are underutilized. They should be exporting to those countries. So it's going to really distort in terms of the value chain. A lot of the companies they've structured their business around some of the input they receive from these neighboring countries. So we feel that it would impact in terms of their top line. Looking at it in terms of the inputs, for most of, when you look at, if you do the analysis of the proportion of goods that comes in, food products that comes in through the land border is about 50% of the total trades, which is about 1 trillion based on the CBN data, based on the survey they carried out in 2013-2014. When you look at that, that's over 500 billion. So if you look at how it would impact in terms of the inputs to the raw materials, so for most of these manufacturing companies, even if they are sourcing their inputs locally, prices of those inputs would also increase. And as a result, it would increase in terms of cost of production. And you look at because of the increase in prices, it will impact on inflation. So the consumer spending that is already being pressured would be more pressured such that they can't even afford some of those products at the end of the day when those companies produce those products. And as a result, it's really going to increase in terms of the unemployment rate, because if you cannot increase your production, if the demand is reducing, then you need to downsize to bring down your staff strength to the level of demand that you have. So it's really very complex situation that for us, we don't think it's something that should be like, it should be faced as much as possible, because if you roll back, it's based on the way it's been structured. The land, the port and sea, most of those goods there, in terms of the tariff, are too high. And the neighboring countries are taking advantage of that to place very low tariff on some of those products. So people use that channel. Also, the managed float exchange rates that we are using, most of the currencies, most of the neighboring countries, their currency are pegged against the euro, which has devalued. against the dollar. But for us, it means that their goods are cheaper. So that has significantly increased the activity within that space because goods are cheaper in that space compared to Nigeria based because of our peg exchange rate. So as a result, you don't, there's really, it's a no-brainer, and we feel that that will increase the activities.
Okay, Adeji, just hold it there at the exchange. We'll get back to you. We're still looking at the market side of that, I mean the financial market. But again, get back to the Director General of the LCCI. Let's talk about the ECOWAS trade protocol, which the Nigerian authorities have accused our neighbors for breaching.
Well, this is clearly a major breach of the ECOWAS protocol.
On the side of our neighbors?
Yes, yes. Because the neighbors, again, they have also kind of condoned the kind of imports of things that are not supposed to come into the country. At least I've listened to the argument of the customs, that there were agreements that were signed that's supposed to govern the movement of transit cargo or transit consignments through Benin to our own country. All these protocols have not been respected. But the reality is that for a very long time, protocols of ECOWAS protocol has been breached by many countries with all manner of impunity. And that is why these things are also indicative of what the kind of challenge we are likely to face with the AFCTA. Because if we are not able to manage integration within the sub-region properly, how do we manage integration at the continental level? So I have serious concerns about the whole idea of even AFCTA going forward, given all these issues that we are seeing. You know, and we need to also realize that Nigeria is the commercial hub of this sub-region. A lot of imports that comes into the sub-region, most of them also come through Nigeria. A lot of people come from Benin, from Togo, from Chad, from Niger to buy manufactured products in Nigeria. Some of them produced locally, some of them are things that were imported into this space. And just as he said, the guy in the stock exchange, we need to dimension the issues. We need to look at the institutional factors here. Because the capacity to police the border is a major factor. Either in terms of the quality, or the number of people, the use of technology, and all of that. Secondly, we need to look at our structural issues. Because when you are talking about closing the border, you must have done a lot about your structural problems. The capacity to produce competitively. That is very key.
What exactly makes Nigeria an attraction for neighboring countries in West Africa and to the north part of the country in terms of our trade and everything? What makes us such a very juicy sugar or honey that every ant looks for?
It's the size of the economy. The economy is big, the market is big, and because we are big,
are porous.
The borders are also porous. But let me say this. This is also about import and export. This is not just about bringing things into the sub-region. It's also about taking things out of the country. So there are two ways to trade. So when we talk about this, it's as though the only thing that happens is about goods coming into the country. Listen to Ayodeji from in the stock exchange. He talked about the impact of this policy on export of some of our manufactured products.
Yes.
You know, then he talked about our policy issue. The tariff policy, the foreign exchange policy. Because some of these problems also require policy solutions. It's not all economic problems that you can solve by fiat or by physical action. We need to look at some fundamentals. The trade policy that we run here is something that also contributes to this kind of problem.
So our neighbors, are looking at us.
They look at us. They look at your policy.
Yes.
They look at your tariff.
Yes. They look at your exchange rate.
They look at your exchange rate.
They look at other laws. They look at the weakness of our security system.
Exactly. They look at your ports. Can you compare the quality of ports we have in Nigeria to the quality of ports we have in Benin Republic? In terms of the costs, in terms of efficiency, in terms of equipment, in terms of technology. So all these things contribute. These are fundamental issues that we need to be addressing.
Muna Yusuf and Ayodeji Ebo, the stock exchange, we need to take a quick break. Everyone will continue this conversation after the break. Thank you so much. counting the cost of Nigeria's total closure of land borders, counting the cost with Muda Yusuf, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Ayode Jebo, who is the CEO at Afrinvest Securities. Ayode Jebo, live to us from our studios at the Stock Exchange. Ayode, let's continue this conversation a little bit with you. So at what point do you think the investment market will begin to look at this total land border closure and the figures you gave us earlier about billions of naira that these account for in the financials of Nestle, Unilever, PZ, Cousins, and a few others? And some of these figures, I'm sure, are not captured on their books as well, because if they sell 10, 20 million goods to me, I can decide to distribute it anywhere I go. They may not be aware of how that goes anyway into the export. So do you think there will be a pricing issue for these companies at some point? Maybe not immediate, maybe not a knee-jerk reaction, maybe a little bit into mid to long term.
Yes, you know what, for investors, what they buy is the future cash flow, expected earnings. So by the time you are expecting that most of these companies, in terms of their earnings, we don't know how long this closure would be, then it would impact on their exports. Because beyond even the export of those goods, we spoke about in terms of how it will impact the costs of their inputs that would impact on their margin. If you also look at it from another side, you also see in terms of the demand for those goods. So we feel that this is just adding more problem in terms of the current challenges the market is going through. For most of these consumer goods, that when you look at the NSE Consumer Good Index, I think, which is down about 31%, is the worst performing index within the NSE for the year. You would know that this is going to add to their woes in terms of the challenges they are going through. The breweries sector, they have been trying to survive. So with most of all these challenges, that would tell more, because the end product is that it will filter into inflation. Food inflation accounts for about 50.3% of the total CPI. So definitely, once that inflation rate goes up and the income is not increasing at that pace, at the end of the day, you have more people that will go, that in terms of the purchasing power will be impacted. So we feel that investors now will be more cautious, though they've been very cautious, and we'll begin to see that pricing in terms of the stocks, especially the consumer goods stocks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Okay, thank you, Ayodeji. Muda Yusuf here at our global headquarters. In terms of the dilemma that the Buhari's administration faces at the moment, how do you think the administration should resolve this?
Well, I think we should be looking at the fundamental issues. What we are seeing are symptoms of some underlying problems. First, we need to look at the institutional problems around the policing of the borders. Because if you have this much difference, that means there was an issue with the policing of the borders in the first place. So we need to examine that and see how we can scale up capacity, institutional capacity to man the borders. Secondly, we need to look at our policy and regulatory environment. We need to look at our tariff policy, because if you have the kind of differential we have in tariffs between Nigeria and neighboring countries, this problem will continue to recur. Take the example of vehicles. The tariff on vehicles is 70%. The tariff in neighboring countries is just about 10% or less. So why will you not have all this problem of smuggling all over the place? And it even makes the job of the customs even more difficult. Because the higher the tariff, the higher the challenge of enforcement and compliance. So we need to look at the tariff properly. The fact that you have a high tariff does not mean that you have more revenue. Because the compliance level will drop. The demand will drop. But if you review the tariffs, compliance level will go up, revenue will go up. Then we need to also address structural issues. Production in this economy is still not competitive. If you want to close your border, you must have at least done something substantial about issues of productivity within the economy. What is the cost of production? What is the operating cost? What is the cost of logistics? What is the cost of clearing cargo at the ports? What is the cost of moving around the country? Only yesterday, the Senate was passing a motion that the government should declare a state of emergency on federal roads. So we are talking of an economy, and you want the economy to even integrate within itself. There must be a means to integrate. But now the roads are bad, the railways are not yet there. So how do we even move goods from one country where they are producing to the other? When you have a situation where the cost of transportation is higher than the cost of goods that are produced. So these are fundamental issues. And I want government to also be mindful of the cost of this on the economy. This economy is not only about rice. There's too much emphasis on rice. The crop component of our GDP is about 15% of GDP produced here locally. And we estimate that to be about 24 trillion of crop production. What percentage of that is even rice? So there's a lot happening outside of rice because there is this disproportionate emphasis on rice and all of this. This economy is much bigger than that.
In trying to wrap this up and bring it down to the street, so right now, what we expect to see is that those places on Lagos Island, Isaleko, where those trucks are loaded and heading to Benin, Togo and all that, will be out of business by now.
They have been out of business for a long time.
So what will those
many
boys
border communities around the country, both in the southwest and even in the north, the economies have been paralyzed. Because the economies of
that's what they survive on. It's just distributive trade, which is the informal sector.
Of course.
Interesting. Thank you, Muda Yusuf. Ayode Jiebo, in about a few seconds, what's your final take on this conversation?
I feel that what government should do is, based on what Mr. Madu has said, is for us to just go back. Even for taking, for instance, for the issue of rice, the tariff on rice coming through the port is 70%. So that means that if you bring in the cost of your rice is 10,000, so by the time you add that 7,000 naira, that's about 17,000. So what government needs to do as part of it is to see how they want to encourage production. Shutting down the border, we can't be self-sufficient with that. Nigeria has a population of over about 200 million. So that will not solve our unemployment issues. That will not solve our growth issues. Government can lower the tariffs from the port so that they make the goods imported through the port more competitive, and they can encourage local production. And as a result, market will always win. This way they are going through it. We did that. I think Nigeria did that in the 80s, and there was no result.
Ayode Jiebo, thank you very much. CEO at AfriInvest, bringing us some market perspective into that. And of course, from our global headquarters studios here, Muda Yusuf, thank you so much, Director General at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you, gentlemen, for weighing on this conversation, which is not over yet.